When I first got into 40k about 2 decades ago, I was obsessed with the mythology and sudden disappearance of the 20 Primarch sons of the Emperor of Mankind. In all honesty, back then, we knew next to nothing. Apparently, they were these legendary generals who led millions of space marines across the galaxy to create the Imperium of Mankind as we know it today. They had a big ol' Horus heresy, and then gone. Nothing. Never to be seen again. Now, as you'll know, since 7th edition, we have gotten a lot more information about the Primarchs. These figures of myth have started returning. Since the Indomitus Crusade, both Robute Guilliman and Lion L. Johnson have returned to the setting, and it seems like Games Workshop is not stopping anytime soon. So in today's video, we are going to cover the disappearance and how every single Loyalist Primarch can return to the current setting. Where did Rogal Dorn go, and is he really dead? Where has Jaghatai Khan gone? Did he go into the webway to have fun with the Drukhari like the memes say? Or is he following some crazy secret objective? What about Leman Russ? When will he return? Why did he leave at all? And of course, we have the horrifying Shadow Raven monster Corvus Corax. How did his ascension happen? And if he returns to the main material galaxy, what will the Imperium think of him? As per usual, all sources used will be shown in the bottom left hand corner throughout the video. I really recommend reading these sources for yourself after watching this lore video, as simply put, a lot of this information has never been covered before, and most people have no idea that half of these novels and articles even exist. All that and a whole lot more in today's video. Also, if you like these kind of videos, consider becoming a channel member. First members only lore video is going live in about a week, and I have officially opened my members only Discord for those who want to discuss the lore with me and my community, and want to help choose which video I'll be making next. Alright, enough talking, let's get into the lore. But before we get into the return of every single Loyalist Primarch, why did they leave in the first place? What happened for them to want to disappear for over 10,000 years? Not just leaving their sons behind, but essentially leaving the entire Imperium leaderless. Don't worry, I will keep it quick. See it as a lore refresher. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, humanity has known the greatest of tragedies and the infinite curse of war. Ever since the downfall of humanity during the Age of Strife, mankind has lost the ability to look to the stars and be filled with genuine wonder and curiosity. It is an age of perpetual darkness. Forget the progress of technology and scientific advancement, for so much has been lost, never to be recovered. Yet the Imperium of Man was not always like this. To create his Imperium, the Emperor needed 20 Primarch sons to help him conquer the galaxy. Warriors and leaders that could hold the tide of Xenos and recover those civilizations that had been lost for millennia. With these 18 nigh-immortal demigods by his side, the ignorance and dangers of Old Night were banished, and a new age of the Imperium of Mankind would be opened. Yet when one nightmare ended, another opened up. The very warriors who had built this new, fledgling Imperium, the Legiones Astartes and the Emperor's sons, turned upon one another. In this age of darkness, the Imperium would burn from the fires of Horus's ambition, and even the Emperor himself would be mortally wounded. Those who survived the Horus heresy were immediately pressed into the Scouring, a war that would see those who had betrayed the Emperor pushed back into the very hell that is the Eye of Terror. But these wars would take their toll on humanity. From Sanguinius and Ferrus Manus to untold billions of human soldiers, the Imperium was almost destroyed. The Emperor, master of mankind and beloved by all, no longer lived amongst the physical. Gone was the golden age of the Great Crusade, replaced by the age of the Imperium, which dubbed their carrion lord as the God Emperor. Over many years, those Loyalist Primarchs who had survived would disappear one by one. Some, like Roboute Guilliman or Lionel Johnson, would be gravely injured, only to be reawakened 10 millennia later. Others, like Leman Russ or Corvus Corax, gave in to their grief and entered the Eye of Terror on personal quests of vengeance. Jaghatai Khan disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Rogal Dorn was gone too, and it is unknown if either of them is alive or dead. Even Vulkan has forsaken the Imperium of Man and has refused to contact anyone for many thousands of years. Now, after millennia of civil wars, 13 Black Crusades, and attempts to rebuild what was lost, only to fail once more, humanity stands upon the precipice of utter annihilation. The High Lords of Terra rule with an iron fist. Countless millions are sent into slaughter. Oppression has become the norm, and freedom is stripped away in the name of security. To be a man in such times is to be one among uncountable trillions, and in this cruel and cold galaxy, you will not be missed. But now, after the Imperium has received its greatest defeat during the 13th Black Crusade, the horrifying fall of Cadia, hope has somehow been rekindled. The avenging son Roboute Guilliman has returned. His indomitous crusade fights for the survival of all of mankind, and the endless tide of doom has been halted for at least a moment. Yet when another calamity rose, so did another Primarch. With the return of both Roboute Guilliman and Lionel Johnson, the outright destruction of the Imperium has been prevented. But where are their brothers? Do they stand alone against the incoming apocalypse? Or are their brothers still out there, awaiting the right moment to finally return? If the separated efforts of two Primarchs can stop the Imperium from being destroyed, what could be done if more return? Could the Imperium not only survive, but perhaps even regain a glimmer of its former glory, with all of the surviving sons of the Emperor returned? And with that dramatic intro out of the way, let's take a look at each Primarch that has disappeared, and how they could subsequently return in the current canon of Warhammer 40K. Starting off with the Ravenlord, which, surprisingly, has been one of the most active Primarchs in the last 10,000 years. Let's take a look at Corvus Corax. Although we do not have an exact date on when Corvus Corax disappeared, our earliest estimates can place his disappearance around 022 M31, the 22nd year of the 31st millennium. To paint the full picture, it is important to understand that Corax disappeared sometime around the second founding, which Roboute Guilliman announced in 021 M31, which was about 7 years after the death of Horus. Yet announcing the second founding does not mean it began immediately. After all, not all of the Primarchs agreed with the idea of splitting their Space Marine legions into hundreds of 1,000-man strong chapters, such as Rogal Dorn, who would only come around to it after the Iron Cage incident. We also know that Corvus Corax felt like he no longer had a place in the Imperium after the Horus Heresy. And while he did fight during the Scouring, there would be periods of years, sometimes even decades, where he would not lead his sons. It was said that before he disappeared, he spent an entire year alone within his Ravenspire, praying to the Emperor for forgiveness and isolating himself completely from the wider galaxy. so dating the exact disappearance of Corvus Corax is hard. But what is most important to understand is that Corax felt drained emotionally, mentally and physically. He believed that he had failed not only his father but also his sons, allowing some of his sons to be turned into the mutant raptors, and subsequently not being able to save them. It broke him on a fundamental level. He had absolute faith in Roboute Guilliman and his vision for the Imperium, but he did not see a place for himself in that vision. Corax was glad to see his legion split into the Raven Guard, Blackguard, Revilers and the Raptors, but all of this was not enough. Ultimately, when Corax had made his prayers, it is unknown whether he found the forgiveness he sought or felt like he had to earn it, but he left the Ravenspire haggard and wild-eyed. He would leave Deliverance that night to go to the Eye of Terror, leaving his sons a single word to announce his goodbye: nevermore. But while this might seem like a grim end to the Lord of Ravens, his sons cling to the belief that one day their Primarch will return. There are, however, other theories about the disappearance of Corax as well. One of these being the theory that Corax has been put in stasis sleep and is waiting for the Emperor's personal forgiveness. The other being that Corax simply disappeared, evolved into the next step of becoming one with the shadows, and has now become an insane hunter. No matter the theory, the Raven Guards still maintain a lookout for his return. They believe that their Primarch will reveal himself when he wants to be seen again, and their vigil is maintained as both a reminder that the Raven Guard will never forget Corax and as a beacon of hope for the chapter itself. However, while he has disappeared from the main material galaxy, some of you will know that he has returned in the lore. Not just that, he has been hunting Lorgar for the crimes he committed and the brothers he turned to chaos. Corvus Corax has evolved into something more than just a Primarch. He has become an executioner, and as seen in Shadows of the Past, his return is going to be quite different from either Guilliman or the Lion. Marduk opened fire. The flare of his combi bolter hit the Ravenlord in the chest and face, a welter of detonations that rocked his stride. Kalta'ar fired his plasma pistol on instinct, the blast hitting Corax in the midriff, splashing cerulean energy across his ornate black warplate. Other fire joined in, missiles and more bolts from Marduk's guard. Lorgar summoned a nimbus of power and threw out a shield of force that lifted Corax from his feet, buckling his wings in the unearthly hurricane. The Ravenlord became a flock once more of fire-eyed black birds, but the swell of Lorgar's will continued to hurl the other Primarch's incarnations upwards, scattering them to the sky. "Quickly, our lord!" shouted Marduk. Lorgar lumbered towards them, his wounds streaming tiny crimson runes like blood. Kalta'ar looked up. The Ravenlord gathered again into a single mass. A dark comet headed directly for them. The Urizen was first through the portal, his massive frame leaving a shadow of his passing, as the other word-bearers dashed through after. Kalta'ar lunged the last few strides, throwing himself headlong into the miasma under the arch, as chill shade swallowed him. He found himself in a large chamber, colorful mosaic underfoot, the walls covered with fresh murals, a wide vaulted ceiling, and domes far above. Part of the Templum Invisio. He had no time for his surroundings, eyes drawn back to the gate, shrieking. The Raven flock scratched and pecked, but they could not pass the warp barrier. Lorgar glared at the apparition on the far side, chest heaving as though out of breath. Corax assumed his mortal shape again, one cheek bloodied and bruised, his eye almost closed. There was much damage to his armor, but he leaned closer to the portal, eyes boring through the divide. "I have your scent now, Lorgar," growled the Ravenlord, his face contorted with monstrous rage. "I will find you, Lorgar. I will destroy you and every vessel you have filled with your taint." Lorgar staggered away, and the portal arch fell dull, leaving only bare stone within its pillars. Marduk and Kalta'ar were quick to appease their Primarch. Their entreaties continued as they followed Lorgar through the corridors and halls, heading towards the center of the grand construction spreading across their new capital on Sikaris. Stairs took them high to the tower at the heart of everything. Black doors opened at Lorgar's approach and he strode within. No word uttered, no backward glance. With a noise that echoed in Kalta'ar's soul as much as his ears, the door slammed shut, leaving him and Marduk on the threshold. There was no handle, no keyhole, nothing by which they might open the edifice. A white Colchissian rune burned into life upon the door, and another. "Deny fate," read Kalta'ar. He turned to the first acolyte. "What does that mean?" Marduk took several steps back and looked towards the pinnacle of the otherworldly tower. Golden fire burned on the summit. Others were hurrying from the surrounding cloisters, demanding to know what had happened. Kalta'ar recognized Corferin amongst them and suppressed a groan. "What does this herald?" asked one of the approaching wordbearers. "We wait for his return. Until then, the great work must continue." Now, this almost demonic Corvus Corax might seem like a problem, a contradiction to everything the Imperium stands for. But Corax isn't demonic in any sense at all. Throughout this short story, Corax is described as an entity of shadows, capable of turning into pools of darkness, a flock of ravens, and of course, the physical form we all know and love. If truth be told, Corax could return at any moment, but seeing as how he has only been focusing on Lorgar for 10 millennia, his return will come when Lorgar finally leaves the Eye of Terror, as he is clearly determined to kill him. His sons will most likely embrace his new form, and those citizens that wish for a hunter in the night will have their prayers answered. But I could see it lead to conflict with both Guilliman and the Lion. In any case, I am eager to see where Corax's hunt for Lorgar will take him next, and I really hope we get to see more short stories like Shadows of the Past. But from the Raven Lord who has been hunting the unfortunate Chaos Primarchs, to the disappeared Praetorian of Terra, where has Rogal Dorn been? Why has he not returned yet? Rogal Dorn, Primarch of the Imperial Fist, is perhaps the most hotly debated Primarch when it comes to his disappearance and potential return. It is said that Rogal Dorn outlived many of his brother Primarchs, and that each loss saddened him greatly. Dorn had a strong dislike for the fate that was growing within the Imperium, which began to worship the Primarchs and Emperor as living gods. Soon after the disappearance of Corvus Corax, Rogal Dorn and the Imperial Fist would engage a Black Crusade, besieging the Cadian Gate, and Dorn would randomly disappear. Of course, this does bring up some questions as to when this exactly happens. It is first of all important to remember that since the Scouring, Black Crusades have been happening decently often. While not all of these fall under the rule of Abaddon the Despoiler, many smaller Black Crusades have been broken by the Cadian Gate or have slipped past to threaten the Imperium in the years between. So Rogal Dorn led 3 companies of the Imperial Fist to save Cadia, while the rest of his chapter was engaged with the Eldar of Grafworld Ultway. During the space battle, where Dorn engaged the traitors, his forces were vastly outnumbered, and so he ordered his sons to engage in brutal boarding actions. Imperial Fist rammed traitor vessels, teleported aboard or entered them through boarding torpedoes, and slaughtered their corrupted crews. During these brutal fights, the Imperial Fist would attack Chaos ships in rapid succession, sometimes even turning their guns on each other or teleporting between them with a captured teleportarium. Yet while the Imperial Fist fought a noble war, they would ultimately be defeated right before reinforcements could arrive. Rogal Dorn himself would be cut down by the traitors while aboard the Sword of Sacrilege. Through his last stand, Dorn saved Cadia and bought enough time for the Imperial Navy and the rest of the Imperial Fist chapter to arrive in force and utterly vanquish the traitors. From here on, accounts begin to conflict. According to the chief librarian of the Imperial Fist, he had discovered the dead body of Rogal Dorn aboard the Chaos ship, apparently cut apart even worse than the Emperor was after his fight with Horus. But at the same time, there are conflicting sources about this chief librarian too. Was he part of the initial force? Was he part of the reinforcements? How did he know what the broken emperor looked like? And how did he carry Dorn's body out before the Sword of Sacrilege escaped back into the Eye of Terror? Things are not lining up here. And then, to make it worse, another account only mentions that the Imperial Fist found one of Rogal Dorn's hands, and that's it. But in both versions, the corpse of the Primarch is brought back to the Phalanx and used to carve the names of every single Imperial Fist chapter master into it to establish their new rank. The Imperial Fist, however, believe that one day Rogal Dorn will return, that their Primarch is not dead, but instead that he will come back to reclaim his lost fist. It is because of this that the Imperial Fist continue to immortalize him, maintaining his seat at the table of their greatest commanders, and even keep his most sacred halls closed, as none may enter without his personal permission. Perhaps the most interesting belief of the Imperial Fist is that through the relic of Dorn's hand, that their Primarch still has a hand in every victory they win. With the return of Roboute Guilliman, the Imperial Fist have also debated what the Imperium would have looked like with Rogal Dorn at its head instead of the Avenging Sun. But some Sons of Dorn have realized that Roboute has become awfully similar to how Dorn would have approached the Indomitus Crusade. Maybe they did have the same stoicism and wish for certainty after all. Although all of the sources I have used so far contradict on whether Dorn is truly dead, or maybe still alive, there is one important excerpt we have to cover, namely the visions of Konrad Curze as he meets his brothers for the first time, as seen in Prince of Crows. The first demigod, clad in wrought gold, inclines his white-haired head in majestic acknowledgement, a king greeting an equal. I am Rogal Dorn. The Night Hunter said nothing. In his mind's eye, he saw the giant die, dragged down by 100 murderers in a dark tunnel, their knives and swords wet with the warrior's blood. I am Ferrus Manus. His eyes were dark, but not cold. The Night Hunter remained silent, seeing the warrior's head clutched by its empty eye socket in another man's armored fingers. The last giant wore armor painted the violet of an alien sunset. His hair was silvery, long and elegant. He alone smiled, and he alone met the Night Hunter's eyes with warmth in his own. I am Fulgrim, said this last lord. It is good to finally meet you, my brother. The Night Hunter still said nothing. He saw this final giant in only the faintest of images, always slithering and laughing, never entirely visible. Konrad Curze is renowned for his strong visions of what is to come, especially when it comes to matters of death. In Prince of Crows, he taunts Sevatar with knowing when he will die. He is aware that Fulgrim will turn into a demonic snake of pleasure, and he is fully aware that Ferrus Manus is going to die. So, is it that far-fetched to conclude that Rogal Dorn is truly dead? In the novel Konrad Curze, the Night Hunter, Curze even calls his father a monster for letting Ferrus, Sanguinius, and Dorn all die in in the future. To add even more to this, when Roboute Guilliman is wounded by Fulgrim, his thoughts stray to Jaghatai Khan and Leman Russ only. He somehow misses out on Rogal Dorn. Was this on purpose, or does he know something we don't? So while there is a slim possibility that Rogal Dorn can return, he is more than likely genuinely dead. Alright, let's take a look at Jaghatai Khan, one of the most beloved Primarchs in the 40k community, and for good reason. Where did he go? Are the memes true? It is said that Jaghatai Khan continued to lead his sons for over 70 years after the Horus Heresy and Scouring had ended. But on one fateful day, the Khan would be called back to his homeworld of Chigoris. In the last few decades, Dark Eldar raiders had started rampaging through the plains of his world and enslaving large portions of his people. The Kagan was torn. He wished to continue hunting the traitors and finishing the job for good, but this new Xenos threat present upon his own homeworld gave him a deep shudder. He was eager to test his warriors against the most elusive of Xenos raiders. This would almost be exciting. And so the Ordu attacked. For how long this conflict lasted is unknown, but it would be the final year of the 70 that the Kagan led his sons for one last time. Fighting around Chigoris and near the Maelstrom was incredibly violent. During these battles, the Kagan noticed a pattern in the Drukhari raids and attacked them at their very base of operations. In the years that followed the Yassan pacification, some believe Jaghatai was lured into a trap and attacked. Ultimately, the Khan found the Drukhari princeling in Coruscant 5 of the Yassan sector and led his chapter into battle. Dense forests became battlefields. The Warhawk, joined by the Kashik of the First Brotherhood, found and cornered the Drukhari Archon, but somehow the vile Xenos fled, disappearing into a webway portal to get away from the Primarch. The Khan rushed after him, and over half the Kashik jumped straight into the webway, laughing as they did so. While the rest of the White Scars vanquished the Xenos, they were utterly devastated to learn that their master had disappeared. For years they searched, and after failing to find him, the sons of Jaghatai united their successors to declare the Hunt of Vengeance. Nearby sectors and the warp itself were scoured clean for their father, and Eldar of all types were viciously killed. As for the fate of the Kagan, who truly knows? The Drukhari already consider a Space Marine captain a prize worthy of going to war for. Imagine the price a single Primarch will fetch. The White Scars continue their search for the Kagan, believing him to continue his hunt against the Dark Eldar deep within the webway. However, they ultimately do not know if he still lives or if he might have been captured. The Stormseers of the chapter peer into the warp and all other realities in hopes of locating their Primarch, but even they are unsure if he was truly lost within the webway or may have vanished in the warp. The White Scars, in any case, continue to fight in Jaghatai's name, destroying the enemies of the Emperor in preparation for the day when the Great Khan completes his millennia-long hunt. They believe that one day Jaghatai will return to them in glory, once again taking up his spear and scimitar to lead his chosen warriors into the vanguard of the next Great Crusade to unify the galaxy. But the Khan is not the only one who has disappeared into the background of 40k's lore, with very few answers to what he is actually up to. Let's take a look at Leman Russ and why he will only ever return during the Wolf Time. The death of the Emperor was the final nail in the coffin for the brotherhood that existed between the Primarchs. While Leman Russ might have been one of the last Primarchs to disappear, he did the one thing that none of his brothers ever did. He promised to return during the Wolf Time. even if it meant he had to crawl back from death. And unlike his brothers, Leman Russ left, having chosen his successor and his companions in a surprisingly proper manner. Those closest within the Space Wolves would journey with Russ into the Eye of Terror, where it is believed they will hunt for the seeds of the Tree of Life with which to heal the Emperor. Russ left during the 197th Feast of the Emperor's Ascension, a yearly feast held in honor of the day the Master of Mankind was placed upon the Golden Throne. Leman Russ has been gone for 10 millennia, only leaving behind Bjorn the Fell-Handed from his closest circle. After 7 years of waiting, the Wolf Lords dubbed Bjorn the Great First Wolf and began the Great Hunt, searching for their Primarch. Their hunt ultimately failed, but sometimes the Rune Priests hear Leman Russ whisper and begin another great hunt. Yet now, in the era Indomitus, the 13th Great Company that left with Russ has returned. Magnus has attacked Fenris, and Roboute Guilliman has reawakened. According to the sages, these are the last things to happen before the wolf time finally begins. Njal Stormcaller has petitioned and spent hours speaking to Bjorn the Fell-Handed, hoping to learn more of this ancient tale. But so far, the wolves have had little success, and Njal's conversations with Bjorn remain secret. However, while many Space Wolves lament the possible death of their father, a veteran of the Grey Crusade and Wolf Lord of the 13th Great Company has his own thoughts. Bulvai Greybeard once hunted the Thousand Sons during the burning of Prospero and chased them straight into the warp. And according to him, Leman Russ is not lost at all, as seen in Wolf's honor. You came to this world because Torvald cast the runes and drew the spear. What were you expecting to find? The Wolf Lord considered the young Space Wolf for a long moment. You've already answered the question. I came looking for the spear, and now you've helped me find it. It wasn't just a spear though, was it? You had no idea that Russ had been lost for 10,000 years, and that he'd left his spear behind on Garm. You expected him to be here. Bulvai gave Ragnar a wolfish smile. Leman is no more lost than we were. I don't know where he's gone, but I know this. He swore an oath to us a very long time ago, and one day he will keep it. How can you be so sure? Thorin asked. The Wolf Lord chuckled. Because, little brother, Leman of the Russ was a scoundrel and an axe-bitten fool at times, but he always kept his word, regardless of the cost. Bulvai held out his right hand. When we last met, he clasped my wrist and swore that one day we would meet again. The Wolf Lord lowered his arm and stared into the ghostly flames. For a fleeting instant, Ragnar saw the terrible wariness once again in the warrior's blue eyes. In time, that day will come. And that leaves us with one Loyalist Primarch that still has to return. Where is Vulkan? He is literally immortal. Why hasn't he helped the Imperium in the last 10 millennia? This one is going to be good. While Leman Russ promised to return to his sons, Vulkan required them to complete a challenge. Only if all 9 of his relics are found would he return to his salamanders and lead them into the greatest and most terrible battles the Imperium would ever face, known as the Doom. So far, the Chalice of Fire, a forge ship, the Eye of Vulkan, which is a laser weapon, the Spear of Vulkan, which is a spear, Kasari's Mantle, and the Gauntlet of the Forge have been found, with a number of these even being used by the current Forge Father Vulkan Histan, who is tasked with finding the missing artifacts known as the Engine of Woes, Obsidian Chariot, Song of Entropy, and Unbound Flame, which, if all recovered, will herald the return of Vulkan, as mentioned before. Although many believe that the Great Rift has made this task impossible, the Salamanders and especially Vulkan Histan have doubled down on the belief that their Primarch will return to them. Regarding his disappearance, Vulkan is said to have disappeared some 1000 years after the founding of the Salamanders, placing his disappearance somewhere at the end of the 31st millennium. Of all the Primarchs, Vulkan is the one with the least explanation as to why he has left. We know Vulkan, like some of his brothers, felt a certain level of failure, which could have become something unbearable if he were the last remaining Primarch. Of course, no matter what, the Salamanders hold to the belief that Vulkan lives as he has died and came back countless times. Vulkan would even return to fight in the War of the Beast after the Imperial Fist, Corland, found the Primarch protecting a backwater world, as seen in The Hunt for Vulkan. "The Imperium has need of you, Lord Vulkan." "Does it? I'm sure that is to believe." He raised his head, looking skywards as if he could see the stars. "I am doubtful. There will come a time when I must return. There will come a war. This is not that time, or that war. Orcs have stood in the great chamber of the Imperial Palace. An attack moon is in orbit over Terra. The worlds of the Imperium burn at the hands of an enemy who has made its home on Ulanor. If not now, if not this war, then when?" Vulkan's eyes blazed. "Ulanor." Corland nodded. He gestured to the warriors of the Last Wall. "Already extreme measures have been necessary. The successor chapters to the Imperial Fist fight under a single command." "Successor," Vulkan began. Again, there was a moment of confusion, quickly dismissed. "Your command." "Yes, it is my burden and my honor as the last Imperial Fist." Vulkan's eyes hardened. "Explain yourself." "On Ardamantua, the orcs exterminated my chapter. Only I survived." After learning what had happened, the death of the Imperial Fist as a chapter, the Last Wall Protocol, and the threat of Ulanor, Vulkan decided to lead the Imperium once again. Although he was reluctant and also wanted to defend the world they had found him on. What is truly baffling, however, was when the Imperium attacked Ulanor, gathering thousands of Astartes, Vulkan had a rather surprising reaction to seeing his sons once again, as seen in The Beast Must Die. "A Salamander strike cruiser arrived in system yesterday, my lord. They requested an audience." "No," Vulkan replied, still examining the scanner feeds. "They will operate as part of the force without favor. Seeing me will only distract them." "They will be disappointed." "That is all?" the Primarch said, turning to Tain. "A few battle stations and a handful of warships?" Chapter Master Tain of the Fist Exemplar gets cut rather short when offering Vulkan the chance to meet his sons. It makes you wonder why, especially when Vulkan had such a close bond with them originally. Perhaps it was his genuine belief that his sons had to fulfill their duty and find the artifacts before he could face them again. But it remains puzzling. We don't get to deeply explore Vulkan's thoughts. Of course, much like Leman Russ, the return of Vulkan is practically guaranteed and only requires the Salamanders to finish their tasks. So who knows, 11th edition might have him returning already. So, to give a conclusive and easy to understand answer to how each Primarch can return to Warhammer 40K, here is my conclusion. Corvus Corax, Rogal Dorn, Leman Russ, Jaghatai Khan and Vulkan have all disappeared. All of them have been gone for millennia. The same was true for Rabute Gilliman and Lionel Johnson, but the return of both of these Primarchs has transformed the Imperium on a near fundamental level. Gilliman no longer fights to maintain the realm of Ultramar, he now fights to keep the entirety of the Imperium together. He has dubbed himself Lord Commander of Imperium Sanctum, and Dante of the Blood Angels has become Regent in Imperium Nihilus. while Nihilus is drowning in an ever-growing darkness, to the point that Abaddon himself has dubbed himself the War Master of Imperium Nihilus. The forces of the Imperium still resist him. When Vashtor and Abaddon prepared to break not just the Dark Angels, but all of the Unforgiven, Lionel Johnson, the Knight of Nihilus, stepped out of the pages of history. While Vashtor's greater plan was a success, the arrival of the Lion saved the Unforgiven. With their Primarch at their head, the Dark Angels are stronger than ever, and with the Blood Angels at their side, they might just be able to save half the Imperium. If Vulkan is ever to return, the Salamanders and their few successor chapters shall finally have a unifying force behind them. A warlord and leader capable of defending the Imperium's countless mortal subjects. Should Jaghatai Khan or Corvus Corax return, these two Primarchs could be the very stuff of nightmares for the traitor legions, hunting them at every opportunity and striking from the shadows before disappearing. The Sons of Dorn, however, have faced their greatest trials yet. The Phalanx was nearly lost during the fall of Cadia. The Crimson Fist have fought a decade-long war for their home, and the fate of the Black Templars has led them down an even darker path. And even if Dorn were to return, would he be proud of what they have done? Or would he be disappointed to see how far they have fallen back into ancient mistakes? And lastly, there is Leman Russ, the Emperor's executioner. Out of all of the Loyalist Primarchs, I would argue he is the least equipped for the current state of the Imperium. But what will his return actually herald? If Leman Russ steps forth from the Eye of Terror, will he herald the doom of the Imperium with the Wolf Time? Or will he complete his quest and heal the Emperor? But what do you think of all of this? Which Loyalist Primarch do you think will return next? And why? Do you believe Dorn is dead? Or do you believe Curse and the other reports are lying? In what order do you think all of the Loyalist Primarchs will return? And at the same time, what Chaos Primarch should return to oppose them? Are you excited for the Primarchs to return? Or would you like to keep them in the background? Let me know your comments, concerns, suggestions, theories and ideas down in the comment section below. If you think I deserved it with this video, please leave a like and hit that subscribe button. It helps push this video in the algorithm and it would make me very happy. Thank you for watching and I will be seeing you guys in the next one. Bye bye.